All right, wonderful. Yeah, so we're gonna change tack now, and I'm gonna start, and then Killian's gonna finish, and we're gonna sort of go over what we've done in HSF training. So this starts with the goal that we want to try to make that thing my postdoc taught me once really available for everybody, independent of the postdoc or scientist in your group. And so I start by just repeating a slide that we saw to begin with that actually says, someone collected data on this. And, the first resource is web pages, which are great, but I would argue that they're not standard in format. So the pedagogy changes and they're not targeted to HEP needs. And the second is exactly that postdoc that taught me something once. So this was nice to see from a different community than ours. So the mission of the HSF training group is to really pursue sort of like sustainable knowledge that can be scaled. So there's this pyramid that you might have seen in the context of IRIS-HEP, where there's sort of different tiers of training. And we're trying to sort of bridge the gap between what you might learn at a university course and what you really need to do your actual research. And a lot of the pedagogy we borrow from the software carpentry group that a number of you might be familiar with. And we've sort of tried to make it our own. So the first thing that we borrow from them that I think gets at the idea of standardizing things is their style of containing things in this nice web page format. And it's not Twicky, and it's not just a set of slides, but it's really sort of like a self-guided tutorial that you can walk through that highlights things in a rather nice way. So we house these on our GitHub HSF training group. And that comes with the nice fact that these are open source and developable by all. So if you look at a training and you don't like it, you can just submit a merge request to make an improvement to it. So this is, in some sense that, if someone has a PDF set of slides, they're not always developable. So hopefully these can systematically be improved by a broader community. But I would say that this is not fully preserved. And so the step that we've taken that goes a bit beyond what Carpentry does is make accompanying videos for the trainings. So of course the videos only come when the trainings are mature enough. And so there's this YouTube channel that I'd encourage you to look at, where a couple of the more mature trainings, I think there's 3 or 4 now, that are up there. So, someone can really, if they can't go to a training in person, they can now have the web page and have the video that guides them through the web page in the same way that if they were in the room, they would be able to profit from. So this is the sort of our wish list that we have in terms of what we want to make trainings for, that we did about 10 months ago at this point. And we've started to populate this in various stages of development. Some have videos, some don't. Some are directly from software carpentry, admitting that I think, one of our downfalls can be that we think we need to reproduce the wheel. But software carpentry already has a nice beginning Git tutorial and a nice beginning, bash tutorial, which some people are never taught how to use those things. And so yeah, it's being populated, but what you see is there's a lot that are not yet developed. But I think we can look at this list and say that these are essential skills that someone needs to be effective as a researcher. And if you if you don't know these, then the type of research you're carrying out is simply following set of patterned, you sort of rote learned executions of commands, and that doesn't really lend itself to being a creative researcher. So this is the first time you'll see this. You'll probably see it from Killian later, that we're going to hold a hackathon now that we sort of have this framework in place and we know what we want to aim for. And you've sort of seen it. We'll discuss more of developing these lessons. So if you have an idea or you'd like to develop one of these things, or you've already developed it and you just like help casting it in terms of the Carpentry's paradigm, then we're going to have a few days where we try to make this happen at the end of the year. Hopefully, people can ease into their holiday break. So we have these trainings, we have these videos. How do they actually get used? How does the knowledge go from web page and YouTube to brain, right? So there's two ways that we've done this. The first is by in-person trainings. What you see in these pictures is how an in-person training works, right? There's a single trainer at the front of the classroom, and on neither screen do you see a set of slides, right? And what you see is the web page. So that's exactly what is always available on the right in the upper photograph. And on the left, you see the terminal, right? And the way this training works is the educator steps through the lesson and does it along with the students. And so I think this is a little different than maybe we're used to teaching people, where you just go through a set of slides and assume they absorb the information. And for more junior colleagues, this gives them a chance to see a more senior colleague stumble and make the same mistakes that they will probably likely make. And so I think that helps sort of build a bit of understanding that these things are not easy for everybody. So these in-person trainings can reach a few dozen people, mainly limited by the size of the room, which is important, and also limited by travel costs, which Killian will also touch upon. So the way it works is, so this is from one of the trainings we held in February, the schedule. So you ask some people to do some things before the workshop, and then during the workshop, this one was focused on 3 of the tools that we use for analysis preservation. So continuous integration, containers, and workflows on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the way we structure it is by having one large chunk of the training that is really experiment non-specific. And that's where the lecture is sort of going through the web page and the terminal side by side. But then in the second half, or in the afternoon, in this case, it was joint with Atlas and CMS. In the second half of each day, we go into sort of breakout sessions or small groups, whatever you want to call it, where things can become specific and people can really ask technical questions and get one-on-one attention for the things that they're stumbling with, right? Because invariably you think you understand something until you try to use it in your code, and then it just doesn't work. At least that's how it always goes for me. And so this is more free form, and it allows people to get personalized assistance. Now, when we do one of these in person, for anybody that's held an event like this, it's highly, the success is highly dependent on the setup in the room. And that's because, I won't go through all of these, but because this is so interaction driven, you have to be able to walk around. You don't want everybody facing in one direction. You want people to be able to interact with each other. You need two screens, right? And that's not something that you typically have in a conference room, right? So these are the type of things that we've learned, and if they can be facilitated, I think that there's a high degree of success. Let's see, so Frederick is unmuted. Yeah, thanks. So the thing we learned from doing this is again borrowed from software carpentries, is that there's not just one educator, and having many educators, we call them mentors, allow people to get that one-on-one assistance. It also admits itself to the fact that not everybody knows everything, and so this is a progression that happened at one of the workshops we did last summer, where Matt and Dan, two of the mentors, were trying to help one of the participants, and they couldn't figure it out, so they called Carol, and then he couldn't figure it out, so they called Henry, and we were working through CMake. So then, of course, Henry knows everything about CMake and was able to address it, right? But that's the type of thing you don't get when there's just one lecturer talking about their set of slides. But invariably, like everything this year, we had to think of a second way to reach people. And so we came up with our virtual version of training. We're hoping this year to have, a dozen of these in-person workshops at various labs and universities. Now, the nice thing about virtual trainings, as was pointed out by Eduardo, is that you can reach hundreds of people, not dozens. But we suffer from the same negative effect, that there's a very large attrition rate. So on the top, the plot that you're looking at, we actually asked people, would you have been able to come to this, right? So these are only the people that actually attended, not everybody. And it goes up by about a factor of 2. We said, if this was at CERN, would you have come? And for half of them, the answer was no. And that's basically because it's hard to convince a PI to let a student and to pay a student to go somewhere, not do research for a week and learn some, perhaps obscure tool or something that they think is obscure. We were able to reach around the globe at the same time, so that was really nice. I think it's all of the positives that people appreciate from virtual interaction and the negatives. So the way that our virtual trainings work is rather similar. We have a kickoff meeting where everybody gathers together to try to make it feel like an actual event, quote, quote. But then we let them work on their own for 2 or 3 days. And this is really where this idea of using the videos originated from. And the idea is, when you're in the room, you're able to see 2 screens at once, and how can you recreate that in the virtual environment? And so, if you click on either of those, you can see the videos, and we just have the instructor record it on their own, and show the terminal and the web page on one screen at a time. And then at the end of the week, after these few days, just like in the in-person, we gather in breakout rooms or video, whatever you want to use. We gather in small groups for just a couple hours, not a whole afternoon. We don't do this every single afternoon. Well, for some of the events we did, for the C++ event we did. But you have to be mindful of attention spans in the virtual world, and this again allows for that ratio of like 1 to 5 for participant to instructor, or instructor to participant. And this is what it looks like from the participant's perspective, right? And I think it's as close as you can get to in person, with without having someone actually walk through this themselves. And so you can see on the right the screenshot of one of these recorded lectures, right? And it's pretty close, I would say, to being in the room. There's closed captions, as Eduardo and the PyHep folks did, which is nice. And this all needs to be supplemented with, oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I said it here. I apologize. I went through this too fast. It needs to be supplemented with some sort of chat application. And it's that chat application that allows people to get quick feedback. And I think that's, as far as I'm concerned, as close as we can get to an in-person type of recreation. The other nice thing, right, is once these videos are made and the content is here, you can have access to it in the same way as someone halfway around the world. And you don't have to, if you weren't available that week for that training, you aren't missing out. So in that sense, this is making, sort of making the playing field even. It's the most equitable way that we can distribute knowledge, and it's sustainable. So yeah, so the question is, does it work, right? Does our training using the software carpentry style and now using this virtual video approach, does it work? And so what you see here is a before and after snapshot. We ask this for a lot of the trainings we do. We ask people, how confident are you? Of course, this is self-reported learning, so take it with the grain of salt you want. But how confident are you with the tool, in this case, Docker, that we're going to teach you? And typically at the beginning of a training, it's, people say, I'm a beginner, I don't know much. But then after the training, it's migrated up by 1 or 2 clicks, right? So I think this is success, and this is typically what it looks like for any of the things we teach. So yeah, so self-reported learning happens, and I think that's great. This is one of the feedbacks that Stefan and Sebastian asked for the recent C++ training earlier this month, and I found it incredibly interesting. So there's a lot of data here, and it's somewhat low statistics, but not not horribly low. And so I'll try to digest the 2 most interesting comparisons, at least what I think are the 2 most interesting comparisons. The first one is comparing the status quo, right? So each of these groups are different ways to hold trainings, and the different colors from left to right, from blue to purple, was it really, really bad, or was it really, really awesome, right? And so what you can see is the status quo, which is what Marcus, said people usually use to learn. People say, yeah, it's really awful, right? When I have to ask Google and Stack Overflow, or or my postdoc, it's awful, right? Now that can be compared with our virtual format, which is this self-study software carpentry with the recorded videos, and you can see a noticeable migration to average. I am neutral about whether this is good or bad. And I mean, that's a migration of just, am I satisfied with the way that I'm learning in my community? And so that was the first interesting thing. The second interesting thing.
Sam, you should try to wrap up.
Okay, yeah, this is right at the end. The second interesting thing is, do people want in-person or virtual workshops? And what we see is people actually prefer virtual workshops. And so, if I try to find the silver lining of the virtual world of COVID, it says we can do this online and people like it. So yeah, so this is our the timeline of what we've done. I won't go through it. The red boxes are the virtual workshops, black boxes are in person, and the black dashed lines are ones that we're going to hold at the beginning of next year. So yeah, so in conclusion, I think we've done a good job this year of establishing a paradigm in which to teach anything, and we're hearing a lot today and the rest of this workshop about the different things that we should teach. And we can now just take the next step and cast it in terms of the tools we have, and I think that will allow us to distribute the knowledge more broadly. And as you can see in both of these pictures, lots of people are smiling, so people have fun when they do this as well. All right, thanks. Sorry to go long.
Great, thanks. Are there questions? Eduardo, you're writing one. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Right. Yeah, great presentation. Lots of material things. So just practical, because you also mentioned PyHub. Out of curiosity, when you got your recordings captioned, which I think it really is a good thing that we should try and be more inclusive in the future. Which tool did you use and who paid for this? Because behind the scenes, of course, there's right. You also need some resources. Unfortunately, not everything is free.
Yeah, good. So we used rev.com. And I mean, Jordan Stark helped us with this. And Iris Hep paid for it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly the same tool as we used. In our case, where actually the Python Software Foundation who paid in the end most of it for the full grant from them went into that, and Iris Hep paid the rest. But yeah, okay, thanks very much. That's great.
Kevin, I think I saw you next.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think this is looking really promising as a program that can grow. But I have one concern, which is on slide 7, you had highlighted some lessons that were being reused from the software carpentry curriculum. And obviously it's great if something's already done and we can reuse it. But my concern is that, you know, there may be some things in this curriculum that are wrong or objectionable, at least in our context. And what do we do in that case?
Yeah. So I completely sympathize with that. The GitHub is too basic for us. So one of the things we'd like is sort of like a GitHub stage 2 that would, I think, be more tailored to us. And if we think that something about one of the software carpentry lessons we object to for some reason, then those are open source too, and they encourage and welcome merge requests.
Okay, that's good to know. Actually, on the topic of GitHub, I will put in the live notes a link to the GitHub tutorial that I wrote and run for CMS. This had previously been behind our firewall because there was some CMS specific content, but I've split it out now. So a lot of it is now public. And maybe that could be useful for this effort to have an advanced module.
Yeah, we should talk about that. I think it would be great for people. Is that the analysis training camp thing that you guys hold?
No, this is actually a separate one. This is more focused really on Git as Git. So yeah.
Oh yeah, we should. I'll look at that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Sebastian.
All right, Sam. Yeah, thanks a lot for a very interesting talk. I was wondering about one aspect. So you mentioned that those videos and materials are available anytime, not only during the virtual event itself, which is great because they're accessible. And as you said, this is this is excellent. However, I wonder, like, how many people do really follow those courses outside of the virtual training dates? Do you have any numbers? I'm kind of slightly worried about this effect of, if I can do it tomorrow, why don't I, I don't do it today because I can still do it tomorrow. So people are not finally pushed to actually do that training. So that's one question.
Yeah, no,
and then,
yeah, sorry, go on.
No, please go ahead.
Oh no, I don't have those numbers. No. I mean, I know they exist because YouTube keeps statistics, but I didn't think to really get hard numbers on that for this.
I'm just curious because I'm looking from the CERN School of Computing point of view that I run, and then the idea is that once people are, at least for the physical events, of course, once people are there, they kind of don't have a choice. They learn, because they're there.
Yeah.
If material is available anytime, then why do I do it today, right?
No, I fully sympathize with that as well. But then I think that sort of is a psychological problem about, like, do people want the Stack Overflow education of programming where you get the solution to your one problem, and that sort of is a an individual, how do you approach your research, right? We shouldn't have to put a gun to someone's head to teach them good practices. I know it feels like that, but
and I think one thing that helps here as well is that you have the interaction part. You can't skip that, the discourse or Slack or the talking, because you're talking about what you're learning.
But that is during the virtual event, right? Not afterwards.
Yes, the idea being that people would then be pushed to try to watch the videos and to go through the material. Now, the last time I taught this was before the videos came out, so I'm not quite sure how it works in practice. But I think that is an important component, and still having that would help.
Okay, thanks. And just a quick other question. So you mentioned this ratio of 5 students or participants to 1 mentor. I'm just curious, well, it sounds very good, of course. I'm just curious where this number comes from, if you try different things or if you've heard people trying different ratios, because it's clear that, it's better to have more mentors, so less participants per mentor, but of course it's also hard to find them. So,
yeah, so this is roughly from the software carpentries as well. This is sort of what they say.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Okay, last, I think we have time for Jim's question and then we should move on.
Well, not a question, but on the same topic of knowing, at least knowing whether people are following it. If you have a service that has some kind of statistics on it, Binder is one of them. You can find out exactly when and for how long people have been running these notebooks. And so then at least if people are following up on it afterward. And so if you're preparing all these materials and people aren't following up on it, then there's reason to change. But there are ways of tracking if people are doing it, to find out if they are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Let's go on to the next talk then.